Well, we had a bit of problem. I was turning into my road, accelerated firmly, and this happened. The first motion shaft broke and made rather a lot of horrible noises as the broker bits clashed against one another. So it was a bit gutting to have this problem. It kept me off the road for a few weeks. That's the drive coupling which splines onto, connects onto the spline. There was a little bit of play there, and this was due to wear. Could have done with lubricating it much more liberally. I did. I'm not too sure I actually put anything on it at all. So that was definite error. Yeah, a bit of a regret that, but the shaft broke anyway, so it highlighted the problem. The first motion shaft on this gearbox from the 1.9 is very small in diameter, so the amount of engagement on the splines is very limited. So accelerating and braking through it was obviously too much strain for it. So I had to work out what to do next. In the end, a bit of umming and ahhing, I hit the forums and found what people were doing when they tuned up the T5s and what gearboxes to use. And the one that seemed to be the winner was the 2.5 gearbox. So that meant different drive shafts, different gearbox obviously, and different gear linkage, and obviously different clutch plate or different clutch splines. So I went out and bought a clutch plate to fit the 2.5, and all of the bits and pieces came, eBay and what have you. It's a gearbox from a scrap vehicle. I had to. That doesn't fit. I think that was another thing I had to sort out. The release bearing obviously is not needed because we don't have any clutch. But if you did, it's there and you could utilise that, I'm sure. Also had to cut the end of that shaft off slightly. It led to lose about 15 mil, 10 or 15 mil off the end of it to make the motor the gearbox. There's not a lot of room between the front chassis legs on the T5. There isn't for the big Siemens motor and the gearbox. So I wanted to give myself some extra room. Other thing I had to do was replace that spline I'm zooming in on there. That was absolutely munted. There was hardly any teeth left on it whatsoever. So luckily that came with the I bought drive shaft and spline combination. So there's just an Allen key in the centre of that. You undo it, and it just slides out. And then you slide the new one in, and just do the Allen key up. It's quite impressed how easy that was to do. Right, other problems or other things to be done. The motor, or rather the adapter plate that's on the motor that used to fit the old gearbox wouldn't fit the new gearbox, totally different. And I decided to do an improvement of, instead of having the motor on its side, which fitted better on the other gearbox and meant I didn't have to grind any bits off the motor flanges and things, it wasn't good for cooling. So that was a bit of an issue. So I was going to put it straight, and I did. The paper template you just saw there, I just made that by spray gluing the edge of the gearbox bell housing and just sticking bits of paper on and making it nice and tight, and then just rub over with a dirty hand, and it marks the paper very more accurately than you probably give it credit, to be fair. And for cutting the alley plate and making sure that holes didn't clash with one another. You don't want a bolt going through half a hole. It's a bit of a pain having to die grind it out. I'd rather have a nice clean hole, fresh one, drill and tap it, decent thread, and I mean, the other option would have been to replace the adapter plate, but I was trying to get this done in a timely fashion. The 3D printed part I'm holding in my hand there is a tool to help me align the plate, the adapter plate, to go between the motor and the gearbox. You might think 3D printing is not going to be good enough, but that was printed in PETG, not particularly densely. It was a nice snug fit on the shaft, and after fitting it to the shaft, I think I'm about to persuade it on there with a hammer and a bit of wood, more gently than it looks. So you've got to make sure it goes on straight, and later on I'll check it with a dial test indicator just to make sure that as you spin it, it is running true. So the idea of this is, as long as that is true on there, and the aluminium plate that I've got has a hole in the middle of it, and everything from that hole is true, then you're eliminating quite a lot of problems. Indeed, if you put the plate on and finish drilling some of the more accessible holes, it's going to true things up. So when it goes on, the inaccuracy, you try to get rid of all the inaccuracies as much as you possibly can. So when you take it apart in the future, it's easy for things to go back together in the right place, or the only way it will go back together is the right way, and you won't have a preloading of, say, the first motion shaft or anything like that. It was a concern that that's what I might have done last time, but I checked things fairly thoroughly, and I believe that that was not the case. It was just metal fatigue. The gearbox may have done 160,000 miles. Who knows? Plus, making it electric for the time I had it electric, nearly 16,000 miles, I think it was. Yeah, it was just too much for it. Did a similar thing with the motor side. What I did with the motor side is I used the bolt holes that are already in the plate, but I wanted to double check the fact that it was absolutely true. So again, using that hole as a datum, if you like, or yeah, well, it's datum. I 3D printed a thin collar which went over the main adapter on the motor to the plate, and I drilled and reamed dowel holes to make the motor fit and only be able to fit in one position. Also help with any torque reactions, that it couldn't slip, slide or move. Here we've got it on the gearbox, and I'm drilling holes and spotting holes through some of the accessible bolt holes. Some of them blind, some of the threads are blind into the gearbox, but these ones are through what would have been the starter hole, and there was a couple of bolt holes there I could utilise to help keep things accurate. Bit of fiddling and fettling around over a day or so, I think it was, of re-drilling the plate. It takes longer sometimes to decide what you're going to do and how you're going to do it than actually doing it. I'm afraid I lost a bit of video there. Once I'd got all of that sorted and a couple of together, obviously popped it in. I took the spline out of a clutch plate for the new gearbox. The new gearbox shaft is vastly bigger than the old one. I wouldn't say it's twice as big, but it's got a lot more circumference to it, a lot more splines, a lot more engagement, and it was also put together with a very healthy amount of grease. I've used constant velocity grease. I'm hoping that that's going to be quite good in as much as it's nice and thick and hopefully will hang around for a long time. And keep lubricating the splines and stave off wear. I'm a lot happier with this gearbox. It works really quite well, and yeah, it's just a lot stronger. It's a lot heavier. It's probably twice as heavy. It's a fair old lump. The old gearbox I could move around on my own quite easily. The new gearbox, it's a bit of an effort to move it at all. Yeah, I certainly wouldn't want to bench press it up onto the end of an engine or something. So I'll just flash through some of this. I'm sorry I lost some of the video. It would have made a bit more, maybe made a bit more sense. Yeah, it was a bit of a struggle getting the drive shafts in. I still work on my own pretty much all the time. I put new front legs in the van, new springs and dampers, and it was quite hard. Usually, you just get hold of take the bottom ball joint off, literally grab it with one hand, swing it out, stick the drive shaft in, and pop it in. I had a devil's own job getting it to do that. It didn't want to do it at all. Either I've gone really weak, or yeah, those front legs are a bit on the stiff side. It's not like normal VWs are a bit sort of I don't know, worn in. I don't know. But anyway, got it all done. I had to make a new cradle for the motor and gearbox to hold that in place. The gearbox mounts just on its normal mount as per VW on that side, but the other side holding the motor in place where I turn the motor through 90 degrees to change that. This is just showing the fact it works, or trying to. I'm afraid the audio was so bad on this, and I apologise for the audio on all of this. I managed to not switch the microphone on for a lot of it, but in any case, I think it was so windy it wouldn't have been much good. Driving around, a lot of people say that you can't change gear when you've got no clutch. Well, you can, and that's me doing it there. It's a case of you hold it against the synchro and wait for it to want to go in. Don't force it. So, and also being a bit ahead of the game. So as you're coming to a roundabout or something, and you know you're gonna have to stop, you just literally palm it to save second, and wait for it to pop in, and you can, if you can go, you can in second, you can accelerate to sort of 50 quite easily, no problem. And if you really come to a stop or whatever, you can pop it in first, and it gives it a bit more acceleration. Accelerates at about 25 mile an hour. So if you just time it right, it's not half as complicated as you might think. It's just a bit different, that's all. There is a foot pedal on the floor, and I press that whenever I change gear, and all it does is turn off regenerative braking. So there's nothing causing problems. It's not like you're accelerating and then braking immediately. You accelerate, you come off the accelerator, you press the pedal, change gear, done. Well, thanks for watching.